a week ago, I wrote a post about the news that IDOCs are officially in the SAP Clean Core extensibility level B, which is very high. And actually it exploded on LinkedIn.
There are so many times that I've seen that the questions have not been asked, and therefore there was some kind of misunderstanding, and the consulting team go this way, business went that way. Ask more questions. It's like the most common thing and the best advice I can give you.
Hello, my name is Michał Krawczyk and I work for INT4AG, a company that produces SAP integration test and simulation software called INT4 Suite. And we have a pleasure to welcome everyone to another episode of Navigating SAP API Testing, the show where we try to explore why and how SAP organization or SAP projects can effectively test SAP integrations, which are the backbone of digital transformations. Today, we're going to make a deep dive into a topic that many thought belonged to the past, but it's making a strong comeback to the Clean Core era, IDOCs. What does this mean for order-to-cash processes? And what role should a functional consultant play in integration testing? To help us unpack this from a functional perspective, I'm joined today by someone who has over a decade of experience of working with large-scale SAP programs across different industries, Mateusz Sionkowski. Mateusz, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Michał.
Before Mateusz, maybe we dive into the topic, could you please tell us a bit more about your SAP background, where you're coming from on this particular subject of IDOCs?
Yeah, so basically my first job actually was being a key user for like manufacturing company where we had to like implement orders for like quotation programs that we had, and it was like 11 years ago actually, and there I decided to be a SAP consultant. So my career went like from key user to slowly SAP consultant. So that's why I'm here. I also had some implementation projects on my back with manufacturing companies, service companies, or support projects with FMCG companies. So I experienced, I think, a lot of integrations, different ways of integrations as well. And I'm happy to be here, Michał.
Fantastic. So Mateusz, so you're coming back from the key user perspective. So this brings us also greatly into the path that a lot of functional consultants were having. So not starting maybe from the service integrator perspective, but you're coming more from the business, and then from there you went into this functional path. Mateusz, maybe with respect of testing SAP integrations, because a lot of order-to-cash processes are directly linked with a lot of integration scenarios, like for example, incoming sales orders, maybe outgoing deliveries, incoming delivery confirmations, outgoing invoices. From your experience, you're a seasoned functional consultant. So within this decade, has there been any significant changes that you've noticed in those integrations? Maybe
the changes are there. I think when we look at the ECC, there was obviously less push on the API because they were sometimes not existing as well. But the IDOCs were mostly used, and they have a lot of, let's say, knowledge base on that part. So yeah, I experienced it on my last, I think, 2 projects, where for example, instead of using orders for IDOCs, we used API, and there are some challenges with it as well. And also the API was used between 2 ECC systems, and like maybe not ECC but SAP systems. So we had ECC and S/4HANA, and basically they were sending us IDOCs. We were then transferred to XML and then JSON. And then we created the sales orders via API. But from my perspective, there was a lot of change. There was a lot of change in terms of how SAP progress across the East. At least for me, I don't know about the others, but for me it changed a lot. The API is a big game changer. But with your IDOC post, I think it brings me more light, to be honest.
Yeah. So maybe Mateusz. So thank you so much. We'll deep dive into those challenges as well. But Mateusz, as you've mentioned, just a week ago, I wrote a post about the news that IDOCs are officially in the SAP Clean Core extensibility level B, which is very high, and actually it exploded on LinkedIn with thousands of reactions. So maybe let me spend a few minutes just to discuss what was this post all about, so that the viewers can also ask us some questions if they would have any. And I also spoke with SAP directly about this, because there are two different perspectives on this as well. So maybe let me try to share the latest findings that we have. So first of all, what we found out with the OSS note from SAP is that IDOC extensibility is a Clean Core level B right now. So what does that mean? That means that IDOCs can be safely changed, and this still belongs to the Clean Core paradigm. But when I spoke with SAP colleagues on this, they said, Michał, we need to be aware of two different perspectives. So on one hand, we've got the extensibility perspective, and on the other hand, we've got the integration perspective. SAP has already published a note on the on the extensibility perspective. The note on the integration perspective is still yet to come. So this will come. This will come probably sooner than later, but it's not there yet. So based on the discussions with SAP colleagues, I thought that maybe I can try to draft the high-level idea where SAP is trying to head. So SAP is still not recommending IDOCs. The standard way of using or selecting technologies for integration for SAP is always to start with a business process. So, for example, we need to find out, is this a new business process? Is this business process changing? And then the first thing that SAP recommends is to check if there are any APIs available. If there are APIs available, then this is probably the way that you should be going, because this is a Clean Core level A for extensions, and this is the future of SAP. So I think this is in line, Mateusz, with what you did in the past. So still is definitely recommending APIs or the new modern technologies like events for some other purposes. On the other hand, when the business process is not changing, maybe we're doing a brownfield implementation, maybe we're doing a selective data conditioning implementation, but the business process stays the same. Maybe we're doing just a very small change, but the business process is still intact. In this case, SAP suggests that at first we should just make sure that the IDOCs are not depreciated on the SAP simplification list. So there is an SAP simplification list. You can go to this list. You can check whether the IDOC is there, because maybe it will become obsolete. Currently, I've checked this list just last week, and there were no IDOCs over there. But this is the first place you should be checking. If the IDOC would be there, then it would be prohibited to use those IDOCs, because definitely they will not be supported in the future. However, if the IDOC name is not there, then you're still free to reuse the same IDOC, because it's IDOC extensibility, so you can even extend those IDOCs. This is still a Clean Core B. So obviously, we're talking mostly from the S/4HANA private perspective, meaning we're not talking about public cloud, right? In public cloud, there are no IDOCs. So we're just talking about the private cloud where the IDOCs can be used. And what does that mean? That basically means that still definitely you should try to use APIs. But if you have IDOCs, and maybe the IDOCs are maybe use IDOCs for EDI processes like order to cash, and you handle 1 million IDOCs per day, and you just want to move to S/4HANA, or maybe you just want to move maybe to the SAP integration suite from any other order technology, there's no need to change, right? If you want to de-risk your implementation, you don't need to change it very quickly. So I'm thinking if there is any, right now we have Mateusz, I don't know also on what is your view, but I think that if an architect or a developer would tell you right now that, okay, you cannot use IDOCs, we have to move everything to APIs, even though the process is not changing, nothing is changing. I think we have a fair way of saying, no, that is not true. We can use IDOCs. We should try to change it, but maybe if we want to de-risk the program, we can still stay with IDOCs because they will be supported. Mateusz, why do you think we had such a big traction with this post? Why is it so important, and why did you comment on this?
Well, you mentioned very good points, to be honest, Michał, and I would like to, let's say, build upon them. So let's imagine we are working in a FMCG company. They use IDOCs extensively with their purchaser, and they have like open text, for example, that is transferring or changing or mapping their IDOCs, right? So now imagine such big company now have to go to API. It's like impossible. So I think this is a way of SAP going a bit forward to let's say allow those companies to move to S/4HANA, because for them it's also a big change in terms of money, right? Because they would have to, let's say, redo everything, right? So this is what you mentioned as well. And from my perspective, the APIs are great, but when we are talking about APIs, sorry, then we need to look on how we can, let's say, investigate the issues, right? So right now, if someone would have S/4HANA and, for example, they have CPI, so Cloud Platform Integration, I think now it's CI, then what you can only do is put on trace, which is usually 10 minutes, and hope you will catch the one that is in error, or you might need to ask someone on the other side, so like a source system, to resend the message. And sometimes it's like this different company, it's very difficult, right? So because you need to contact the IT guys, because the business may not be able to perform the action to do one more request. And therefore you are like a bit stuck. You don't know where to start investigating what is the issue, because in the info message in the CPI you don't have a lot of information.
Because you've touched a lot of points. Maybe let me come back maybe to the first one. So on one hand, you've mentioned that probably staying for some of the scenarios, maybe the scenarios that are not changing, staying with IDOCs, if they were used in the past, can actually de-risk the project from this perspective, because we're using the same data. And I think you've mentioned that we can also speed it up because it's already there, so we do not need to redo this.
Yes.
The question
Exactly.
The question that very often pops up is, so when should we change it? When should we change it? When should we start looking for APIs to replace the IDOCs? Do you have any idea or any concept? Because we know that on one hand, the IDOCs have been used for 40 years already. So from the functional perspective, probably they cover most or all of the functionalities that you would like to have. With APIs that are relatively newer, maybe they do not cover some of the functionalities. On the other hand, when SAP is adding new functionalities, maybe those new functionalities will already be covered using APIs. Does this distinction make sense, or have you seen anything like this, or is it purely like theoretical maybe?
I think it actually depends on the way you want to be, from my perspective, like business or consulting perspective, how you want to be connected with the third party, let's say. Okay, if you need like immediate response, so basically you want to know the sales order is created, or if you have stock, if you have like a 3PL, right? So external warehouse, and you want to know if the stock is there. So this way allows you to get those messages immediately. And for those, I would say API is great. But we also need to be aware that there are some limitations on the APIs as well. like the number of requests, and I had on my project such cases as well. Yeah, so basically on one of my projects, we had a situation where we had orders connection. It was API from the source system. It was like a sales system. And then they were only sending us requests one time a day. And there were a lot of orders, you know. And then at some point, the queue was blocked, okay? And the response were not going back. So we also had to work on that part as well to not extend, but make the capacity or what we can send and give the response back a bit bigger, right? Because otherwise we would not be able to process whole batch of orders.
Because IDOCs are famous for their for being able to process massive numbers of messages, because of how also we can reprocess them on the backend system. So there is a lot of other technologies that are also supporting IDOCs. We have to remember that IDOC is, on one hand, is a format, but it's not. It can also be a protocol, which can be either RFC or HTTP. But on the top of the IDOCs, we have a lot of programs on the backend system, for example, that allow reprocessing IDOCs, processing IDOCs in batches. We can combine IDOC multiple messages in a single IDOC for the same purpose. Do you think that we have something like this? Have you ever worked with something like this for order to cash processes, like for example with the application interface framework that is coming from SAP? Have you ever used this, or is this?
Yeah, I have not worked with IAF to be honest. I do have it on my project, but it was for CFIN, and you have then designated consultant that is doing R2R mostly, because this is like R2R connection for the accounting documents between two different systems, right?
Yes, it's a separate license. From the licensing perspective, it's a separate license to be able to use it across all of the integrations and also custom integrations. So this component is very powerful, and it allows us to put a lot of additional, let's say, complementing features like reprocessing, finding errors, working on errors on APIs. But this is a component that that SAP customers have to purchase separately. So with IDOCs, everything comes, let's say, within the license. If you want to work with APIs and have this capability, I mean, customers have to also think about maybe deploying SAP application interface framework, so SAP AAF.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, from my perspective, APIs are a lot of trouble to investigate. And
Mateusz, could you maybe give the users an example? Let's say a sales order is coming through. Let's say we have 1,000 sales orders. They are coming to the SAP to post sales orders. And what is the difficulty if you could compare it to IDOCs?
yeah, for example, I have such case I had such case in Portugal. They had like a source system, I think it was like, let's say, source system. And at some point, when they were processing, like doing a billing, so basically remove the billing block on a sales order. At some point, it is like, it's very random, but for some reason connection is lost or something, and then the sales order is not getting released, this specific one, and the others are. And in Portugal, the case is that when you do the billing, the documents have to be in specific order. So, and also the order has to be by the date. So let's say for today, let's say 22nd, you did not release it, but on the 31st you did. So now when you want to bill it on the 22nd, the system, the SAP is not allowing you to do it because that's, let's say, Portuguese legal requirement, right? And then you are stuck with this document. So you need to then change the billing date manually on the document, right? So, and to investigate it, it's really difficult because it is really random based. You don't have much information. You need to put a trace before that happens, right? So right now, you can still look for it, but with IDOCs, you would have a queue, okay? The IDOC will not come. And then you can see that, or you would have the error status or whatever, right? which would then allow you to either reprocess the IDOC or see what is the error. But here, it's really difficult, and that's why I say APIs are great, but there are some limitations on those.
So I think that Piyush is also mentioning that perspective. So APIs have some issues with monitoring. I mean, I wouldn't call it issues, but definitely it can have a successful status in CPI or in integration suite, and it can still be a failure in S/4HANA, right? So this is definitely the case.
Not only that, but it can be successful in the CPI. But if it go to the, let's say, source system or the person that is receiving it, or the company that is receiving it, it can be error on their side, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
It's like a lot of things in between that can go wrong.
Yes. So it's also, so definitely when we're looking, and maybe let me revert to this. When we're looking at this perspective is just showing the connectivity perspective and maybe extensibility perspective. We do not talk a lot about monitoring perspective, which is a different creature of its own, because there are huge differences in monitoring APIs and in monitoring IDOCs. And even though we might have tools like SAP AIF that can help us actually in both scenarios, because you can use AIF also to monitor IDOCs, those are not that widely used products. SAP AIF, fantastic software. There's also I think four SAP Press books about just this topic. So everyone who is interested maybe in SAP AIF, they can also have a look at this. But it's not a component that is used at all of the customers for custom integrations. So making sure the monitoring is definitely one perspective, and then the error handling perspective, Mateusz, right? Because maybe we can also, what if we want to, what if we got 100 IDOCs that are wrong? With IDOCs, for example, there's a very simple way of changing 100 IDOCs and reprocessing them. With APIs, without the use of AIF, this becomes a little bit more tricky again on the maybe AMS side. Have you also experienced something like this?
Yeah. So basically, the AMS side, it depends from where we are sending the message, right? If the message comes from external system to us, then we need to ask them to resend it, because for us it's an error, we cannot do anything with it, right? When we send it, it depends on how do we send this information, because in SAP you can also have like calls, like events, right? For example, what would be a good example in this one case? I think MDG sometimes, connection between S/4HANA and MDG. It's sometimes also difficult to investigate, because you have then change pointers. You also have statuses on the MDG, and sometimes O2C consultants, like in my case. We are not experienced in MDG. It's like separate tool. You have separate consultants, right? But you need to have that integration part and see what are the, let's say, troubles in actually this one issue that, for example, as for MDG customer have not replicated to S/4HANA, right? And then to investigate it, it's also difficult.
Yeah. So, and could you maybe tell us a little bit more about this, about the collaboration? Because one of the topics that we've discussed also before this discussion is, how do you work with different teams? Because as you've mentioned, integration is not something, or integration or SAP is usually not something that a single consultant can work on with all of its dimension and aspects. In case you have to work with, for example, with other functional consultants like MDG, with integration consultants, what do you think the biggest challenges are when collaborating on the integrated business processes?
I think the biggest challenge is the structure of the project itself. And I hope any project managers listen to me right now, to be honest, because sometimes we work in silos, okay? So you have O2C team, you have integration team, you have purchasing team, but then you have process like I don't know, intercompany process, right? So you have integration, you can have orders, and I see Michał, your smile, because I think you had the same experience. And what usually is happening is that project is getting delayed, okay, because people are not talking with each other. No one knows what is going on O2C team. They don't know what integration is doing. I mean, I saw such cases. And then on business part, they don't have like a clear owner, okay? And this is also common issue on the projects, that there is no clean owner of, let's say, the solution or the process. And then what happens is why I'm working actually in as a SAP consultant is that those customers, those businesses are hiring, for example, me to be like a middleman, to understand the integration part, to understand the order to cash part, and to be like a glue between the let's say consulting companies. I mean, consultants working for the consulting company that is doing the implementation, and to, let's say, match it all together. Because for example, I went on the project, and it was mainly support project. It was like I was doing like UAT with business and hypercare, right? And the biggest issue was that we had integration from ECC system to S4HANA, and we were sending the orders, okay? And the issue was that business don't know how to investigate all the issues. Like they were not technical. They were just not technical. And integration with API is very technical. You need to understand what you are doing, right?
Yes.
And that's why I was working, I don't know, 30 days in a month, right? But we did the UATs. But that's the additional cost for the businesses when they are not, let's say, having clear structure or clear owners of each of the component, let's say.
Mateusz, so this is a mitigation. So you've described that, for example, companies can hire consultants like yourself who can mitigate those issues.
Yes.
Do you think that this can be done in a different way? Because from what we're hearing and also from our past experience, all of the SAP projects suffer the same problem, and it actually would be fantastic to have more people like yourself who are working as those connectors, so that we can bridge this gap. Do you think that there can be actually projects that can work in a different way from the reality perspective?
No. I think they can. I think a lot of it comes to how the project is let's say drive, because you can have a project based on Jira, so you have agile style project, you have epics, right, and then you have story points, and then you have people assigned to this epic, and then they have to, let's say, bunch up together, and then they can work. But usually it's like a mix of Jira, waterfall. That's how I experience the project. But obviously there are some cases that it's pure agile, right? I'm not saying they are not, but I think agile is helping a lot when it comes to integrations, because you can then have a smaller team working on a specific project and they can communicate.
Okay. So what you're saying, if I get this right, is that working with integration can be different depending on the project management perspective. So maybe waterfall,
Yes.
a little bit more difficult. Maybe then you need those people who are working as intermediaries. On the other hand, with smaller, more agile projects, maybe there is a way to work more closely with the integration team, so there is less need for those consultants. Mateusz, is it also different depending on the type of the SAP implementation? So, for example, greenfield, selective data transition, a simple brownfield where nothing is changing, or maybe just a business as usual change. Does this perspective is it also important?
So I did not. I mean. So I did had like one greenfield implementation, because we are moving from, let's say, Microsoft Dynamics to S4HANA. But the processes and the integration part was not that developed there. And it was also based on the templates which I created like years ago. But on the brownfield, I can say that it's it's better for me from my perspective. It's better to adopt what you actually had, right, and then try to transition internally, right, to the APIs instead of, let's say, doing it from scratch. Because I can tell you that the product will get delayed. It's like 100% because you need to uh, discuss all the, let's say, interfaces that you have. You need to involve business. You need to involve stakeholders like project management because you need to make some decision. Also, external parties have to be involved, right? So there is a lot of people and teams that have to be involved just to change the integration process, which is obviously time consuming, right? And in the fast-paced environment, when everyone to have a go live immediately, right? It's difficult because then you are going to have gaps, you are going to have mistakes, and then you are going to change your interface, the integration that was actually working in the past, and nothing was wrong with it. Like you didn't. Okay, if you had like a lot of errors with it, then yeah, maybe it's worth to look at it. But if it was clean, like no many mistakes during the month, then I mean, from my perspective, uh, it will be more risky to implement the APIs than, for example, stick to IDOCs. Like if you do brownfield, right? For example, uh, going back to the waterfall case, the the thing that changed the most is the experience of the consultants. Because right now, I'm not implying anything, guys. But in the past, it was like one consultant was responsible for like whole logistic model. He was like SD, MM, like logistic execution. He was everything, right? And therefore, he had like huge knowledge on the integration as well because he needed to. And right now, the teams are more like focused on one area, right? And therefore, they are missing this integration piece. And that's also one of the issue of the on the waterfall project. But yeah, let me have words. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. So maybe just to reiterate, so the approach, which kind of interface to use, also depends heavily on many other dimensions. Like, for example, what type of project this is. Do we need to do it? Meaning, is it a greenfield, maybe a brownfield, a bluefield, or selective data transition? On the other hand, what is the methodology for the program? When do we need to apply this? So is it a very quick project, maybe in an agile way, or maybe this is a longer project and can be done in a waterfall using waterfall methodology? So these are very valid points, and it's very often we're just looking. A lot of companies are just looking strictly from the technology perspective. Oh no, we should go for this IDOC or maybe for this interface. Okay, but what does it mean in the long run? Will we be able to do it quickly? Will we be able to support it? Can we de-risk the program? Let's say if we're a huge company and we're running millions of EDI messages per day. Mateusz, there was one maybe more topic that I would like to highlight, because you've mentioned that you're also happy that the IDOCs, let's say, are back to the safe mode from the perspective of testing IDOCs. And I know that a lot of functional consultants have their own tricks and tips on how to test IDOCs. Would you be able maybe to share one or two tricks that you're using that maybe not a lot of other consultants are aware of, specifically related to testing IDOCs, that allow you to do some things in a maybe quicker, better, faster way?
So there are a few transactions. I think everyone on this call might be aware of those, but I will just mention them. So we have, let's say, Swiss knife, WLF underscore IDOCs. IDOC. This is transaction that allows you to, let's say, compare, reprocess, change status, search by business content data. So it's like everything in one. But
I
then
don't think
for me, if I work,
everyone knows this transaction. So thank you for mentioning this. I'm pretty sure it's not a very common knowledge. And again, this is maybe just to highlight this. This is a free transaction. There's no need to buy anything. You can just go to this transaction and start using this. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries, Michał. It's good that you mentioned it. And the other one that I would recommend if you are working on AMS is WE19, and this is transaction that allows you to copy the IDOCs from the production system to the quality system. and then you can, let's say, play with it, right? See what is giving you an error. And also, obviously, BD87. If you can reprocess the IDOC, BD87 is the great tool where you can reprocess it from foreground from error. There is on a Google, you will find it. So basically, processing BD87 foreground from error. It allows you to see. I use it, for example, for accounting documents. So when I have integration between companies within the SAP for the IDOCs, and I see strange error, and I don't know what it is. For example, I had it once for the AP document posting, and what it allowed me to see what actually was happening in that accounting document when it was created. So it's very useful because then you can see directly what is the issue. Yeah, and I think that's the two most important ones. Obviously, changing status, if you have access, then SF38, there is like RC1 IDOC set status that allows you to change it. Sometimes helpful when you want to close some IDOCs that were, let's say, so you have retriggered the output, you have new IDOC, which is correct, and then you want to close the old IDOC so you can change the status there en masse, so multiple IDOCs at the same time. Yeah, I think those are the most, the ones that I use the most. To be honest, and I think everyone probably is using them as well. But yeah, WE19 for me, reprocessing on the quality to be able to test it is a very, very good one.
Sure. So maybe to reiterate, BD87 for checking the status. We can change the status of the IDOCs if we want to reprocess it maybe one more time. We can use WE19. Mateusz also mentioned this one, so we can fetch the IDOCs from production, reprocess them, or maybe reprocess the IDOC that got posted, but we want to change something in the process. So these are all fantastic tips. So maybe thank you so much, because the audience is not always on our meeting we have a lot of integration consultants, so maybe they don't know about all of those technologies as well. On the other hand, we have, as I mentioned, we have the SAP Application Interface Framework that also puts on the top of this the ability to monitor multiple different integration technologies. And again, if you want to go maybe one step further, you can have a look at INT4 Suite, which is the product that allows to simulate and test all of the SAP integration technologies, both inbound and outbound. It can also be done in an agentic way. So I'm posting a link to this to the SAP learning training also for this. And maybe Mateusz, let's have a look at some of the questions, because what I'm seeing actually on the in the comments is that we have a lot of information about monitoring. But let's try to have a look at some of those. There's from ABG the question: are we talking about on-prem and private cloud and not for public cloud? Yes, ABG. So in public cloud, IDOCs cannot be used. So we're only talking about the on-premise and private cloud deployments. So this is only the IDOC topic is only related to those two. Manish is saying that some retail IDOCs have actually been depreciated. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Manish, for this information. I don't know if this information was mentioned in the SAP simplification list. I don't know if you could comment on this or not, because what we got from SAP is we should always be looking at the SAP simplification list for any kind of depreciated messages. There's another question from Marco. I understand that monitoring regular API calls can be hard and more trouble, as there isn't a great monitoring integration like for IDOCs, except for the use of AIF. So Marco, you're absolutely right. Yes. There is a solution. There is a software, because actually AIF is a fantastic software. Unfortunately, it doesn't come within the standard license, so you have to license this separately for custom IDOCs. At least from what I remember, I've been working with AIF like many years ago, and this was the case, and I think it's still the case. So it helps definitely to use AIF. I also have another question, another information from Manish. API errors should be available in SRT money. Mateusz, do you have experience in using this transaction from the functional point of view?
To be honest, to be honest, I do not. But even if they are, let's say, available, right? They are only showing you the log. They are not
Yes,
showing you the payload. So
they
it will be
are.
difficult, even if.
So actually, for specific API calls, we can get the payload also in SRT money, but it's not for all of the API's errors. And this transaction, again, because SAP is delivering SAP AAF, it's not a transaction that is very easy, for example, to search for issues. You cannot, when you've mentioned, Mateusz, all of the, let's say, tips and tricks on reprocessing IDOCs, on working with IDOCs, most of those are not available in SRT money. So you cannot reprocess a transaction from over there. There's no way to do it. It's very difficult to, if we look at the WE19, if we reprocess an existing IDOC, we would have the payload. If we do the same with SRT money, the payload will not be available. So there are some big differences. Manish, you're absolutely right, and thank you for bringing this topic up. Unfortunately, from the workability perspective, this is a very, at least from my perspective, this transaction is very, very difficult to work with compared to the IDOC reprocessing, for example, or changing the statuses. But it's there. It's also there. Piyush is mentioning, as a customer, I would really like to save additional costs. I mean, this is a very small comment, but you know, from the if you're running a multi-million-dollar program, and you have to, someone is just telling you, hey, we have to replace IDOCs even though nothing is changing, the business process is exactly the same. This is a very valid question, right? Cost is a very valid question, and another perspective is risk. So what is the risk of changing those IDOCs? And maintenance, yes. So, but maintenance maybe comes after the project, right? So if we look at it from the perspective of the program, it's the time, risk, and cost, and obviously it will repeat itself once you go live.
But one thing, when you are having multi-million-dollar projects, you usually go with the waves. So you're only going to discover after the first implementation what are the, let's say, most common issues. And then if you are, let's say, you went straight for the API and everything is API, then definitely you are going to have your team, if you have any, like a COE team, Center of Excellence team, to be knowledgeable about how to work with those new kind of errors for them, because they might be like, let's say, old school ECC folks that don't have much experience with, for example, CPI, right?
Yes, definitely. Maybe another comment from Rama. Where do we have the simplification list provided by SAP? I will try to provide the link after the webinar in the comment section. But if you just type SAP simplification list in Google, you will be able to find the portal, and there you just can paste the IDOC name or just maybe put the IDOC, and you will see all of the IDOCs or all of the functionalities that are getting depreciated that for the S/4HANA implementation. We've got another comment from Hemant. What do you mean by public or private cloud? So Hemant, in this case, we only mean SAP S/4HANA public and SAP S/4HANA private cloud. So that means that with the SAP S/4HANA public cloud, there is no use of IDOCs at all. So the topic that we're discussing today is not even relevant. For all of the S/4HANA private and on-prem implementations, this is the topic where we can still maintain IDOCs, and this is where we can maybe reuse this decision tree. Because with S/4HANA public cloud, this is not even relevant.
Yes, and also, Michał, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the CPI messages that are coming in they also have a cost, right? So I think there is cost when you send a message to the SAP CPI. And if you
Yes.
have like a stuck API call on the other side that you repeatedly get the message, then you get additional cost that that IDOCs, I think, do not have, right?
Yes. So this is the cost perspective related to technically running those messages, because IDOCs can be processed in batches. So for example, if you receive, let's say, from any kind of EDI provider, or maybe directly from your customer, if you receive 1,000 IDOCs in a single file, you can send it as a single file to the S4HANA system, and we can have 1,000 IDOCs that will be processed by this. With APIs, the case is unfortunately like this, that we have to split this. So that means this will be 1,000 or 1 million, whatever the number is, messages that we will have to process. And that brings us also to another perspective, which is related to performance. So just because we can send them in batch we can send IDOCs in batch, the performance will always be better in reprocessing those messages or processing those messages. If we need to make 1,000 individual calls, the processing of those calls will be slower. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. I don't want to say this, but it will be relatively slower. Jade is asking, could you please share some lights on reprocessing perspective in API context? I know that we can adapt AAF with wrapping the standard APIs. We don't even need to wrap it. AAF can also work with standard APIs, but we have to justify the terms of cost. So Mateusz, I think you've talked about this. Maybe you can answer this. What is your reprocessing perspective in the API context, maybe compared to IDOCs?
So actually, in my case, when we are talking about external API calls, so going from the, let's say, source system right to us, to S4HANA, then we can only ask the source system. If it's about the APIs from S4HANA, actually, we are sending, for example, invoice message type, IDOC, to the CPI, and then CPI is translating it to the, let's say, JSON format and then XML, or yeah, I think like that. So technically you are still using IDOCs, even though it's outgoing message, but then it's getting mapped to the XML format for the third party to read. Yeah, that's how it's on my project. So basically, you create a new output message in the billing, and that's it.
And another question. The question is the SRT money a technical code? Definitely, this is a technical code. But I would say similarly to what we have with WE19. And the question, can a business user understand this? I think that's Mateusz also tried answering this. For business users, it's very difficult to understand the technicalities. So this is another layer which probably could use some simplification. That business users, even though, for example, SAP AAF, initially it was just designed to help business users. Again, there are some technicalities related to this transaction. So again, I'm not sure whether this is actually the case, whether it's the business users who are operating, for example, BD87 or maybe AIF. Mateusz, have you ever seen like a business consultant operating BD87, maybe changing the status, reprocessing IDOCs, or is it not the case?
No, it was more like you might have like a local key user sometimes, but it's more like this key user is like very close to SAP. Like he has access to some technical transactions, because we also have to be aware of the licenses, right? That if you have technical access, then you might have higher license, and that's also additional cost. So not all business users can have access to those, because again, additional costs. And yeah, so that's probably not a business transaction, to be honest.
I'm really curious and stunned, because we were supposed to discuss maybe the IDOC extensibility and the IDOCs coming back, and again, most of the topics that we're trying to cover are related to, and the questions also are related to monitoring. So probably how to make sure that maybe the functional consultants, the business users, the integration consultants can work together, but they need to be able to monitor what is happening. Also testing, you've mentioned the testing or retesting or resending those messages. So maybe not only monitoring, but also error handling, right? So the error handling perspective. So
Yes.
not that much on what kind of technology do we use, but what are the additional programs or capabilities that those technologies use for monitoring, for error handling. I think this is also a
And
really
as
good.
we have, yeah, and as we have discussed this, Michał, I think we can both agree that IDOCs have more, let's say, extended support when it comes to monitoring and reprocessing and let's say investigating the issue than APIs. And I think that is one of the reasons, I think, from my perspective, that they are back. Let's say.
That may be the case. So maybe just also just to add to that, my colleagues have published a few months back an SAP Press book, which is called Architecting EDI for SAP S/4HANA. This book covers a lot of perspective. There's a lot of information for functional consultants. So, for example, how to set up the new output types using BRF Plus, how to test IDOCs, how to reprocess IDOCs. There is a lot of integration perspective also. So, for example, my colleagues are discussing how to work with integration suite on different EDI related topics. So, for example, integration suite B2B components. If anyone would be interested, this is also a book where my colleagues. It's a big book. It's a Bible for the EDI. It covers a lot of the topics that we're discussing right now, and one of the highlights is also monitoring and error handling. So this is also something that you can have a look at. So Mateusz, any closing remarks maybe on this topic, or are you happy about this about this new information from SAP? I think you've mentioned that in the comment that it does make you happy. Any closing remarks on this?
Yeah, I think when you are on the project, guys, and if you're OTC consultants or like any other consultants, I think you need to try to be close to the integration team, and you also need to listen to business what let's say pain points they have right now with their own integrations, so that you could predict what issues could be if you are going to change from IDOCs to API. Okay, so I think that's the best I can give you. So just have your ears open for information from the business, and always ask them a question. Like, there are so many times that I've seen that the questions have not been asked, and therefore there was some kind of misunderstanding, and the consulting team go this way, business went that way, and at some point we have UATs, and then like, but this should work like this, but this should work like that. And then like people have not understood each other. So I always ask more questions. It's like the most common thing and the best advice I can give you. Ask more questions.
Again, so again, not that much a technically related advice, but it's a joint project, joint opportunity. Let's not work in silos, right? I think that is also a fantastic advice. It's about time to wrap up this episode. Mateusz, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your functional perspective on IDOCs, on the OTC integrations. Please, everyone on the call, make sure that to connect with Mateusz on LinkedIn if you want to stay connected, and you can also get his experience. As I mentioned, if you ever want to dig deeper into this topic, I would highly recommend checking the book that I've mentioned. So, for example, the Architecting EDI. We also have an SAP learning training on testing SAP integrations, simulating SAP integrations, and obviously IDOCs are a major part of that. Thank you everyone for showing up, and I will try to answer the unanswered questions also in the comments right after the webinar finishes. And hopefully we'll see you in the next episode of Navigating SAP API Testing. Thank you so much for the conversation today, Mateusz.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Michał.